So it now looks like we've got the full set of allied rules for the Arks of Omen. Let's talk about these new and very weird Battle Brothers rules, where it looks like, say, Imperial armies might be able to ally leagues of Votan far more easily than other Imperial armies. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about the big changes to Warhammer 40k once more. It seems that someone does have their hands on the Arks of Omen book now, and in true leaks fashion, it does seem that they're choosing to leak them in small amounts as opposed to the entire book all at once. Today we've got the Battle Brothers Allies rules, so let's talk about what we've got. Quickly though, before we get into the main section of it, I just wanted to make one quick PSA. I did post a correction on my previous video, but it is basically now confirmed that the army deployment and first turn changes that were rumoured from Warhammer Plus's battle report basically were just them getting it wrong, as opposed to any big sweeping changes to the game. Around about 12 hours ago, Games Workshop released a battle report where they were playing Necrons against Imperial Guard in one of these new Arks of Omen missions. They did showcase a whole bunch of changes for the Arks of Omen, certain new secondary objectives, and a change to the Necrons in particular, but as well as that they did a couple of key army deployment things very differently, and with a new mission pack where those rules were potentially changing, it did imply that they might be altering them for the Arks of Omen. The two things that they said were that when they were deploying the armies, they clearly showed the Guard player deploying their entire army before the Necron player, which isn't how you do it at the moment, and they also stated that when there was a roll-off to go first, the person who won the roll-off said that they won the roll and then they chose to go first, not just went first because they had to. That'd be a big deal because choosing whether you go first or second on the roll-off will be significantly more powerful than having to. Some armies much prefer to go second, particularly if they can't deal damage to the enemy who might be hiding. In general, it just looks like neither of those changes are in effect in the new book. There's leaks of the entire section for deploying armies and determining first turn. Deploying armies still seems to alternate unit per unit, so it looks like they were just doing it differently in the battle report thing. And determining first turn, the winner has to take first turn. I guess maybe it's not too hard for Games Workshop's employees to get confused from time to time. Different game modes in 40k play it a bit differently, as do different mission packs prior to this one. It is maybe just a little bit disappointing when you look at a Games Workshop official preview and they get some of the basic rules wrong, but then maybe I shouldn't have read too much into it. They are human after all, and everyone makes mistakes. I might be just a little bit more wary to take those battle report things as gospel in the future. In any case, getting back to the new Allied rules, these will all be coming in the Arks of Omen mission pack. That's coming for pre-order on Saturday, with some big changes to 40k, including the detachment, reserves, and the mission special rules. One of the major changes is allies though, and from previous previews and leaks we already do have a fairly good grasp of how this is going to work. In army construction in these new rules, you get a single Arks of Omen detachment, and then a single allied detachment to field alongside it. And from the way that it's worded, I'd say that it very heavily implies that you're supposed to just take this Arks of Omen detachment and the allied detachment if you want, and you can't run any other detachments besides those. Rules as written though, I'm not 100% sure they've said anything that actually rules out you taking, say, another patrol and paying command points for it. It doesn't say that you can in the mission pack in any place, but it also doesn't really explicitly say that you can't either. I was thinking that the Battle Brothers rules section would clarify that, but it really doesn't seem to. I feel like this is something that's just a little bit ambiguous and Games Workshop should probably FAQ. Otherwise though, if you are just going for the Arks of Omen detachment and the Allied detachment, the Allied one must be drawn from the Battle Brothers section of the book, something that we didn't have the full contents of before, but we do now. I think it makes for some fairly interesting reading. So here we have the leaked Battle Brothers page. It has basically rules for allying things to Imperium, Chaos and Xenos, though I would say that perhaps the things that aren't listed here are just as interesting as the things that are. First up, and perhaps most interestingly for things like Allied Votan, is that there doesn't appear to be any clear exemption for these Battle Brothers rules stopping you breaking any army-wide special rules, say for example Space Marine Combat Doctrines or Sisters of Battle Miracle Dice. The vast majority of what's allowed won't break those rules anyway, as per the rules in their own codex, provided you take certain numbers of them. But this does look like it to be relevant to the Leagues of Votan, which currently, if you do take that allied patrol alongside the Imperium forces, looks like it would compromise the combat doctrines unless there's some other rules section that we haven't seen yet, or Games Workshop FAQ it. Secondly, and something that I'm actually a little bit disappointed about, was that there's no rules for Tau allying with Votan. That was something that I was honestly expecting that Games Workshop would put in here once they clarified that Votan will be able to ally with the Imperium, and at least to my mind it makes sense that if the Imperium can, the Tau probably should be able to. They've got some good lore establishing that they've got friendly relations in the past, trading things like ion and rail weapons. The Tau were known to ally them when they were known as the Demiurge, And I feel that allowing Tau to have another Xenos faction ally would just be a massive flavour win. They are kind of known for creating a bit of a coalition of different alien races and then using them to work together for their shadowy greater good. In game, it would add another really fun option for the Tau as well. Currently, they've never really had any options for allying other armies, so I feel that would be quite an exciting development if they did allow them to ally the leagues. On that front, I think there's just a whole load of reasons why it would have been a good idea, and it's kind of sad that Games Workshop chose not to. As well as those, it looks like there's no rules here at all for any sort of generic super faction allies, say for example one Imperium army allying with another, or the same for say Chaos Forces with Death Guard and Thousand Sons, Eldar and Drukhari, or Tyranids and Genestealer Cult. Certain combos are permitted, like Knights and the various super faction allies, but it really does seem peculiar that say the Imperium wouldn't be able to infield a Space Marine force with some Guard allies, but for some reason Space Marine forces with some Leagues of Votan allies they're just completely fine. It really seems to be a bit of a weird choice in my opinion. Even if they're not massively optimal, then allying one Imperial faction to another has been a thing for a really long time now, and I felt like Games Workshop had done a pretty decent job of disincentivizing it by these pure faction rules, where say you can mix two forces, but say the Space Marines lose their combat doctrines or something. Just to have it outright banned is a bit weird if this is indeed what's intended, unless they are intending you to be able to take other detachments beyond the Arks of Omen and allied detachment and just be able to field those allies but pay CP for them. Finally, within all these choices, there don't appear to be any obvious Supreme Command detachments or Agents of Chaos. You can field an Agents of the Imperium Patrol, but it looks like there isn't the equivalent for the traitors. I guess Agents of Chaos for the most part are either the Dreadblade Knights or the characters that could slot into other detachments anyway, like Cypher. It does mean that, say, Abaddon will be taking up one of your HQ slots though, as opposed to being in addition. So that's the stuff that isn't there, but let's talk about the things that are. First up, we've got the Imperium, and the Imperial allies basically have the three options that they previewed on Warhammer Community, plus the Imperial Guard have one as well. Basically, anything that's Imperium can take an Agents of the Imperium auxiliary support or patrol detachment, so that'd be your Inquisitors, your Voids Men at Arms, your Assassins, and things like that. Kind of fun that you can go a bit mix and match with those now. I guess in theory you could have an Inquisitor leading them, have some Voidsmen at Arms being the troops' choice, and then have something like an Assassin or Joe Cairo Weaponsmith in the elite slot, and have a bit of a mix and match within that detachment. Otherwise, you've got the option of taking Imperial Knights with a super heavy auxiliary detachment and one Freeblade unit, whether it's Armigers or a Big Knight. That's an option that's just got a lot stronger, as previously it would have cost you 3 CP, and they already are kind of interesting to ally into other armies, particularly the Armigers with some fast moving OBSEC. Then we've got the Space Dwarves. You can also take one Votan Patrol in the army. As I mentioned, if I'm reading this right, then it looks like there's no obvious exemption to breaking army-wide special rules, which would be a bit weird, seeing as these guys would be the only ones out of the entire list that do so. Wouldn't be too surprised if Games Workshop issues some sort of FAQ of them to maybe stop you breaking army-wide special rules, but I guess we'll wait and see on that front. I think there are going to be some serious errata documents dropping alongside the Arks of Omen release. Finally, we've also got one Imperial thing for the Imperial Guard. This was something that I was wondering whether Games Workshop might have forgotten about, but it does indeed appear that you can take an allied detachment with a patrol of Scions in it. I think that makes a lot of sense, to be honest. It means that you can have your pure Scions detachment and have them get troops and objectives secured, as if they were all having to share the Arks of Omen detachment, they wouldn't be able to get troops and be OBSEC unless your entire army was Scions. Glad that they remembered them at least, and gave them one exemption. Otherwise, for Chaos allies, it looks like we've got the option for one Chaos Knight Dreadblade Super Heavy Auxiliary. Again, I'm sure that'll be a popular option, being command point free. Pretty much literally any of the Chaos armies quite enjoy a little bit of extra fast OBSEC fire support. Things like Wardog Brigands or Huntsmen can be quite good for that. Otherwise, the Demon style special rules are kind of similar. The generic Chaos Marines that don't include any of the Cult Marines will be one Demon patrol of any flavour. That's the same as it is now, and if you have it less than a quarter of your power level, it won't break the faction-wide special rules. And then the Cult Legions for the World Eaters, Thousand Sons, Emperor's Children, and Death Guard, they all get their god-specific Demon patrol as well. The only other one for Chaos is that Disciples of Be'lakor Army of Renown. That one gets you an extra Traitoris Astartes patrol if you've got a Demons detachment as your primary, and they're one of the only ones that can take 2 allied detachments, as you get the patrol, and you can also take a Korvax Knight as well, as per the rules in their detachment already. Finally, for the Xenos, a lot of them don't really ally all that much anyway. It does look like if you're Orcs, you can't take another allied patrol of Orcs or anything. But as you'd probably expect, Drukhari and Craftworlds can both take a Harlequin patrol, Kinda makes sense, and it wouldn't break faction rules due to their travelling players. And the Gene Stealer Courts, they can purloin some of the new guard tech, they can take a Brood Brothers Patrol, Super Heavy Auxiliary, or Auxiliary Support Detachment, though at the moment it appears that we're still waiting for some sort of clarification as to how their keywords work with the new Guard Codex. As mentioned, it doesn't look like there's anything obvious for Craftworlds allying with Drukhari or Gene Stealer Courts allying with Tyranids. Looks kind of implied that that's just not intended with Arks of Omen, unless Games Workshop say anything else to the contrary. So anyway, some interesting stuff there. If this really is the entire cut and thrust of the Allied rules in Arks of Omen though, I do feel like it's a bit of a strange set. It just feels like there's a lot of disparity, say, between taking a Leagues of Votan patrol in something like a Grey Knight army, compared with taking Allied Imperial factions that work together quite well in the lore normally, say some Planetary Defense Forces allying to some Space Marines, or say a unit of Grey Knights attaching themselves to a guard force to arrive from nowhere to help them out against some demons. Let me know your thoughts though, and what you make of the leaks down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more like this, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be looking forward to covering the entire Arks of Omen release once we get it. I will review the book in full and go through the faction secondaries and things. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and that's how I can keep on making videos like this quite so regularly. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.